Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody, please, have a seat. Thank you so much, Travis, for the wonderful introduction. Thank you for Melody Barnes, who has done more than anyone to help coordinate this forum, and it's extraordinary work, and so we appreciate her leadership. You know, we're here today to discuss one of the greatest threats, not just to the well-being of our families and the prosperity of our businesses, but to the very foundation of our economy, and that's the exploding costs of healthcare in America today. In the last 8 years, premiums have grown 4 times faster than wages. An additional 9 million Americans have joined the ranks of the uninsured. The cost of health care now causes a bankruptcy in America every 30 seconds. By the end of the year, it could cause 1.5 million Americans to lose their homes. Even for folks who are weathering this economic storm and have health care right now, all it takes is one stroke of bad luck, an accident or an illness, a divorce, a lost job, to become one of the nearly 46 million uninsured, or the millions who have health care but really can't afford what they've got. And we didn't get here by accident. The problems we face today are a direct consequence of actions that we failed to take yesterday.
So I tell you what, let me just start by saying you're not alone in this. So here's how we're going to think about this. We can do better than this as a country. No one should go bankrupt over medical problems. No one should have to refinance a mortgage in order to do copays on prescription drugs. No.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. I've been recently having an exchange in the comments section about debt and bankruptcy in the United States. And the claim has been that it's the number one reason, healthcare shocks are the number one reason why people get or go bankrupt in the United States. Now, there are a number of myths out there that tend to conceal reality. Now, these myths have been perpetuated for a while now, beginning with Barack Obama, when he was trying to push through Obamacare and health reform. Once again, I commend Barack Obama for actually making an effort to address the issue. But the implementation and the result and the solution that they came up with was not adequate, and, as was deemed recently, unconstitutional. But there were a number of claims that Barack Obama made in relation to healthcare bankruptcy. He said in a C-SPAN address and a health summit that he was holding that someone goes bankrupt for medical reasons every 30 seconds in the United States. And he makes the case of all the issues that we have in relation to healthcare in the United States. So that summit was an effort to address the issue. It's also been pushed by Elizabeth Warren, for example, that healthcare or healthcare shocks is the number one reason or a top reason why people go bankrupt in the United States. Now, there are a number of articles that you will find that support this idea, but there are a number of problems with those reports. Now, I want to just have a discussion now about bankruptcy, and I'm going to challenge this idea that it is as prevalent as people say it is. And another question that I want to address is, has bankruptcy reduced in places that have initiated healthcare reform? So if we're going with the idea that healthcare shocks cause bankruptcy in the United States, a solution like Obamacare or a solution like Romney Care in Massachusetts, where healthcare reform was implemented, I found an interesting study that showed that bankruptcy had not reduced in Massachusetts, but actually increased. It says, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the United States passed a healthcare reform law in 2006 with the aim of providing health insurance to nearly all of its residents. The law mandated that nearly every resident of Massachusetts obtain a minimum level of insurance coverage. And this is just a brief overview of healthcare reform in Massachusetts. The law mandated that nearly every resident of Massachusetts obtain a minimum level of insurance coverage, provided free and subsidized healthcare insurance for residents earning less than 150% and 300% respectively of the federal poverty level, and mandated that employers with more than 10 full-time employees provide healthcare insurance. The law was amended significantly in 2008 and twice in 2010 to make it consistent with the Affordable Care Act. Major revisions related to healthcare industry price controls were passed in August 2012, and the employer mandate was repealed in 2013 in favor of a federal mandate. Because Mitt Romney was the governor of Massachusetts at the time, the law has colloquially been called Romney Care. So that's a brief overview on it. Now, here is the report that looked at bankruptcy in Massachusetts in the time that there was healthcare reform. In 2009, illness and medical bills contributed to 52.9% of Massachusetts bankruptcies versus 59.3% of bankruptcies in the state in 2007, and 62.1% nationally in 2007. Between 2007 and 2009, total bankruptcy filings in Massachusetts increased 51%, an increase that was somewhat less than the national norm. The Massachusetts increase was lower than in 54 of the 93 other bankruptcy districts. Overall, the total number of medical bankruptcies in Massachusetts increased by more than one-third during that period. In 2009, 89% of debtors and all their dependents had health insurance at the time of filing, whereas 1/4 of bankrupt families had experienced a recent lapse in coverage. The conclusion being, Massachusetts health reform has not decreased the number of medical bankruptcies, although the medical bankruptcy rate in the state was lower than the national rate both before and after the reform. So I think that's an interesting note. When we're talking about healthcare reform, we have to be very careful that we need to actually achieve the goals we have set out. And it appears, using Massachusetts as an example, that medical bankruptcies, for some reason, have not decreased. They have actually increased. So can we suggest or consider the possibility that if healthcare reform was instituted in the United States, that it may not improve the issue? Now, moving on to another study that looked at medical bankruptcies. I'll read it to give you an overview. During the push to pass the Affordable Care Act, President Obama often described the crushing cost of health care that was causing millions of Americans to live every day just one accident or illness away from bankruptcy, and repeatedly stated that the high cost of health care, quote, causes a bankruptcy in America every 30 seconds, close quote. Stories of illnesses and injuries with financial consequences so severe that they caused households to file for bankruptcy were used as a major argument in support of the 2010 Affordable Care Act. And in 2014, Senators Elizabeth Warren and Sheldon Whitehouse cited medical bills as the, quote, leading cause of personal bankruptcy when introducing the Medical Bankruptcy Fairness Act, which would have made the bankruptcy process more forgiving for medically distressed debtors. But it turns out that the existing evidence for medical bankruptcies suffers from a basic statistical fallacy. When we eliminated this problem, we found compelling evidence of the existence of medical bankruptcies, but discovered that medical expenses cause many fewer bankruptcies than has been claimed. Clearly, many people face medical debt but do not go bankrupt. Even after correcting for overly broad definitions of medical expenses, the existing widely cited evidence on medical bankruptcy is built on the fallacy that when two things occur together, there is necessarily a causal relationship between them. Continuing on in the study. Our study was based on a random stratified sample of adults 25 to 64 years of age who between 2003 and 2007 were admitted to hospital for a non-pregnancy related stay for the first time in at least 3 years. We linked more than 500,000 such people to their detailed credit report records from the period between 2012 and 2011. The scatter plot shows the results of our analysis. The results show a clear effect of hospital admission on bankruptcy. The rate of bankruptcies rises sharply in the years after hospital admission, and this change is statistically significant at conventional levels both 1 and 4 years after the admission, after which bankruptcies appear to level off. This finding indicates that the expenses that result from the illness or injury that cause the hospital admission, for example, out-of-pocket medical costs and lost labor income, cause some people to file for bankruptcy. However, the magnitude of the bankruptcy effect is much smaller than previously thought. We estimate that hospitalizations cause only 4% of personal bankruptcies among non-elderly U.S. adults, which is an order of magnitude smaller than the previous estimates described above. Our findings suggest that medical factors play a much smaller role in causing U.S. bankruptcies than has been previously claimed. Overemphasizing medical bankruptcies may distract from understanding the true nature of economic hardship arising from the high-cost health problems. So that's the study. The study looked at it from a different angle and found a different result to the narrative that has been spun thus far. And I hate to sound cruel in what I'm saying, and I know people will feel that I am cruel, but we have to work with accurate information if we're going to be deciding on the best pathway forward. Just telling everyone that so many people are becoming medically bankrupt for their health shocks is not the best way to argue. And I think, as this article states, it distracts the true nature of economic hardship arising from high-cost health care. And I think it won't help us but hurt us in this debate, in this discussion. And we're already finding that. Barack Obama used these same arguments for the Affordable Care Act, and that did not go to plan. The Democrats are following the same narrative to bring in universal health care. Now, we have to stop and think about this. Megan McArdle from the Washington Post talked about this as well. She talked about the article saying, their method is considerably more robust than the one adopted by Warren, Elizabeth Warren herself that is, who looked at the presence of medical bills in bankruptcy filings. The problem with doing that is that bankruptcy tends to be multi-causal. If you have a $500,000 house, 3 luxury cars, a boat, and also a heart attack, which of these things caused your bankruptcy? These are the questions that we have to address. And I've made this video in response to a person who made a comment that in the United States, medical bankruptcy is one of the number one reason or the number one reason for bankruptcy in the United States. And it's just not that simple. There's so many ways that you can get into debt. There's payday loans, for example. There's credit card bills that stack up, etc. There's so many different ways for a person to go bankrupt. One of them is health reasons. But I think that the problem is over-exaggerated in an effort to bring in universal health care. And I understand it's the emotional argument, but we can't argue in that sense when so much is on the line for the United States. If we can avoid the emotional arguments, if we can get to the heart of what we are discussing, we can find solutions that will actually work. And I've also been accused of being a conservative on this channel, but I must say, and make a distinction here, that conservatives generally want the system to stay as it is, for the status quo to remain. But I must insist in expressing that I want the system to change just as much as anyone else. But the question that we have to ask is how we go about doing that. The world is looking at the United States, cringing at the results that we are getting, and encouraging us to go the way of universal health care through the government. But I'm proposing here that there's a better way that we can find. If we put in the effort, if we debate, if we research, we can find a solution that suits the United States. And we have the opportunity to do something great in the United States with health care. But unfortunately, we are falling short. The Democrats keep pushing and they keep pushing. And I don't see as much of a response from the Republicans, although I will give some credit, with Trump trying to bring in greater transparency for pricing at hospitals, etc. So that is a step in the right direction. So I'd love to hear what you think about this video. I'm trying to dispel the myth that medical bankruptcy is such an issue and that because of that issue we should move to universal health care. There's more to the story here, more that needs to be discussed. So let me know what you think in the comments, and let's have a discussion. Talk to you soon.